8:14 hours, Thursday, February 3rd, 1983. The library's front entrance, a modest brick structure set on a quiet corner in Midtown, opens with a faint metallic click. Outside, the city is waking slowly. A sparse flow of early morning commuters, the distant hum of trolley wires, and the intermittent hiss of a passing delivery truck. Inside, fluorescent lights hum steadily, casting soft, uniform illumination across the reading tables and circulation desks. Dust motes drift slowly in beams of light striking the windows, unremarkable, yet precise markers of the ordinary rhythm that will soon become the lens through which subtle anomalies are observed. At the center of this environment is the librarian, a mid-career civil servant, whose daily routine has settled into disciplined repetition over the past 15 years. The first task of the morning, a visual inspection of the circulation desk and the surrounding reading areas. Each chair is adjusted to exact alignment, each surface cleared of stray paper or personal items left behind by late-night patrons. The librarian's motions are deliberate. A hand glides over laminated tables, books are stacked in uniform piles, the accession stamps are tested for ink flow, and the typewriter on the reference desk is checked for responsiveness. Each step follows a carefully internalized sequence. 8:18 hours. The first patrons begin to arrive. One man enters carrying a briefcase, his movements brisk but precise, a contrast to the slowness of the librarian's measured activity. Another patron, a woman with a canvas tote, pauses at the front desk to glance at the notice board, then proceeds to the periodical section. Each arrival, each trajectory through the building, is noted in the librarian's mental log. Nothing seems unusual. Patterns are predictable. Children on school trips arrive mid-morning. Retirees settle at tables along the east-facing windows, and university students arrive in small groups around 10 o'clock hours. 8:24 hours. A man in a dark trench coat enters the building through the side door, a seldom-used entry primarily reserved for maintenance staff and evening patrons. His posture is relaxed but alert, a slight stiffness in the shoulders betraying habitual caution. He does not approach the circulation desk, nor does he browse the shelves. Instead, he pauses near the reference section, glancing briefly at the rows of catalog books before moving to a table near the rear reading area. A folded newspaper rests on the table as he sits, its presence appearing incidental, yet the librarian notes it. The routine of a librarian is punctuated by procedural cataloging. Books returned on the previous day are sorted according to accession numbers. Overdue books are logged and reminders prepared, and a visual check is conducted for misplaced or damaged materials. 8:33 hours. Each action is recorded in a sequence of mental timestamps. Return processing complete at 8:31. Overdue notices prepared at 8:32. Shelf inspection complete at 8:33. The precision is not extraordinary, only methodical, creating a stable baseline against which future anomalies will be measured. 8:36 hours. The trench-coated man rises briefly, walks to the periodical shelf, and replaces a magazine, noting the alignment of the spines. He then returns to the table, adjusting the folded newspaper slightly as though its positioning is significant. The librarian observes, noting the timing of each movement, the routes taken, and the brief durations of each action. 8 hours 36 minutes and 17 seconds. He adjusts the newspaper. 8 hours 36 minutes and 45 seconds. He checks a specific shelf. 8 hours 37 minutes and 2 seconds. He returns to the table. These fractions of minutes are recorded mentally, cataloged as part of a pattern of behavior that seems deliberate but lacks context. 8:42 hours. A regular patron, a young student, requests a reference book on Cold War political theory. The librarian retrieves the volume, noting that the trench-coated man watches the interaction briefly, then returns his attention to the table. The gaze lasts no more than 30 seconds, yet its timing coincides with the handover of the book, a small detail added to the growing mental dossier. The librarian notes the overlap without conjecture, emphasizing procedure and observation rather than interpretation. 8:47 hours. The librarian moves through the reading area, adjusting chairs and checking the organization of periodicals. Each movement is deliberate, measured, designed to create a clear spatial and temporal map of the environment. The man in the trench coat remains seated, his body turned slightly toward a rear corridor that leads to a stairwell seldom used by patrons. He folds the newspaper again, this time with slightly more precision. The librarian, adhering to her routine, registers the action but continues cataloging books returned overnight. 8:51 hours. A minor disruption occurs. A maintenance worker enters through the same side door, carrying a toolkit. The trench-coated man does not rise, does not interact. Instead, he tilts his head, following the worker's brief path with peripheral attention. The librarian notes the brief intersection of movement, recording the times and approximate distances between the two individuals. No overt interaction occurs, but the precision of movement and awareness of spatial relationships are documented in minute detail. 9 o'clock hours. The reference desk is checked for misfiled items. Each card in the catalog is inspected, ensuring proper alignment, legibility, and placement according to the Dewey Decimal System. The librarian notes the brief presence of a paperclip protruding from a volume in the 940 section, a detail seemingly inconsequential yet catalogued. The trench-coated man shifts in his seat, his hand briefly resting atop the folded newspaper, which now reveals a slight crease along its spine. This is noted as a minor anomaly, logged with timestamp. 9 hours, 1 minute, and 12 seconds. 9:07 hours. The librarian conducts a perimeter check, walking slowly to the back entrance, noting the condition of the doors, the locks, and the minor wear along the threshold. Every scuff, dent, or scratch is documented mentally, part of a routine environmental survey. Upon returning to the reference desk, the librarian observes that the trench-coated man has again shifted position, the newspaper folded differently than before. The consistency of these micro-changes is catalogued, but does not yet trigger overt suspicion. 9:14 hours. Coffee is prepared in the staff lounge. The routine includes checking the inventory, brewing a small batch, and returning promptly to the desk. The librarian's absence is minimal, less than 5 minutes. On return, the reading area appears unchanged. The trench-coated man remains seated, but a minor adjustment has occurred. A book previously on the nearby shelf is now slightly angled, its placement inconsistent with cataloging norms. Timing recorded: 9 hours, 19 minutes, and 3 seconds. 9:22 hours. The librarian reviews the circulation logs for discrepancies. A stack of overdue notices is compared with the physical volumes, ensuring that no item has been misplaced, misshelved, or improperly processed. Each entry is annotated with precise timestamps and notes on anomalies. The trench-coated man now stands, adjusts his coat, and exits via the rear stairwell. Timing is recorded: 9 hours, 24 minutes, and 18 seconds. The brevity and subtlety of his departure highlight the latent tension that pervades the otherwise mundane environment. 9:27 hours. Patrons arrive in predictable patterns. A small cluster of children from the neighborhood school, a graduate student carrying folders and notepads, an elderly man reading newspapers at the west window. The librarian catalogs movements, noting overlaps, durations, and deviations from normal behavior. No immediate threat is evident, yet the cumulative record creates a precise, observational map. 9:32 hours. A book is found misplaced on the reference desk, out of sequence with the Dewey system. Its presence is unremarkable, yet, in the context of prior observations, it is documented. 9 hours, 32 minutes, and 45 seconds. Each micro-detail, folded newspaper, angled book, or minor displacement is logged in mental notation, forming the latent framework for investigative recognition. 9:37 hours. Routine maintenance alerts occur, a brief interruption of fluorescent lighting, a soft hum from a heating vent, the distant murmur of street traffic. The librarian continues methodical observation, cataloging the environment with consistent attention to detail. The trench-coated man's brief presence and microactions remain unremarkable to casual observers, but are integrated into a growing chronological record. 9:42 hours. The librarian pauses, surveying the reading room as a whole. Each patron, each object, each minor shift is contextualized within the established baseline of routine. Nothing overtly unusual has occurred. Yet the documentation of precise movement, time, and environmental detail forms the initial layer of what will become critical intelligence in subsequent sections. 9:47 hours. The first signs of irregularity begin to solidify as patterns emerge from repetition. The man in the trench coat has appeared multiple times over consecutive days at similar hours. Minor adjustments to newspapers and books, recorded meticulously, suggest the presence of deliberate activity. However, at this stage, the librarian maintains strict observational discipline, cataloging facts without inference or conclusion. 9:52 hours. By mid-morning, the library returns to quiet stability. Patrons are absorbed in reading, typewriters click in sporadic cadence, and the librarian's routine continues uninterrupted, shelving returned books, logging circulation, and performing environmental checks. Each act is executed with attention to precision, forming a procedural baseline. 9:57 hours. The narrative closes section 1 with a subtle tension of the ordinary layered against the latent presence of anomaly. The librarian's day continues, unremarkable on the surface, yet each recorded timestamp, every micromovement, and minute detail collectively forms the essential framework for future suspicion. The slow burn tension, characteristic of Cold War procedural investigation, is established, ordinary life observed with meticulous attention, poised on the threshold of discovery. 10:03 hours, Thursday, February 10, 1983. The librarian resumes her morning routine with precision. Books returned overnight are logged, periodicals inspected, and circulation records cross-checked. Yet, subtle anomalies noted in prior weeks begin to crystallize into a recognizable pattern. The trench-coated man, previously a single data point, has now appeared in nearly identical circumstances on consecutive Tuesdays and Thursdays. His routes, dwell times, and interactions, or lack thereof, are consistent. His presence predictable yet unexplained. 10:08 hours. As the librarian observes from a reference desk, she begins methodically documenting microactions in a dedicated log. The trench-coated man approaches the rear reading table at 10 hours, 8 minutes, and 43 seconds, unfolds the same newspaper he carried on prior visits, and places it atop a slightly shifted book on the table's corner. Timing is precise. 10 hours, 8 minutes, and 43 seconds to 10 hours, 9 minutes, and 12 seconds. Each small movement is recorded. The angle of the newspaper, the spacing between books, the man's posture. This granular observation marks the first conscious attempt to track behavioral anomalies, rather than merely noting them. 10:12 hours. A second anomaly is recorded. A small, folded scrap of paper is partially visible under the newspaper. The librarian notes the position, dimensions, and creases of the paper, cataloging it in terms of spatial relation to surrounding objects. The observation is clinical, procedural, documentation of fact rather than interpretation. Yet, the cumulative effect is a slow escalation from routine monitoring to investigative observation. 10:18 hours. The librarian reviews circulation logs for overlapping patterns with prior visits. The trench-coated man consistently appears between 8:36 and 8:51 hours, exits briefly, and returns within a 15-minute window. Distances traveled from the side entrance to the reference table are measured mentally, approximately 18 steps, adjusted slightly for stride variance. Each repeated action reinforces the anomaly's significance, providing a foundation for potential federal reporting. 10:23 hours. Microactions extend beyond the man's immediate vicinity. Subtle interactions occur with environmental markers, a book spine slightly displaced, a newspaper crease altered, and occasionally a pen left upright on a nearby ledger. The librarian notes the apparent synchronization of these adjustments with her own presence in the room. Timing is precise. 10 hours, 23 minutes and 4 seconds. 10 hours, 23 minutes and 19 seconds. 10 hours, 23 minutes, and 36 seconds. The precision of observation mirrors intelligence gathering protocol, establishing baseline conditions, documenting deviations, and avoiding conjecture. 10:30 hours. A minor temporal anomaly arises. The trench-coated man departs briefly, returning 5 minutes later with a folded item previously unseen. The librarian observes its placement between catalog cards in the reference section. Documentation includes date, time, location, physical description, and environmental conditions. Ambient light is overcast, casting minimal shadows. Movements are cataloged to the second, forming a sequential record of activity. 10:35 hours. Observation continues beyond direct interactions. Patrons' behaviors are cross-referenced to detect potential coordination or unnoticed contact. A graduate student pauses near the reference desk precisely as the trench-coated man adjusts the newspaper. The coincidence is noted but not assumed significant. Procedural discipline maintains the distinction between fact and speculation, reinforcing the investigatory tone. 10:42 hours. The librarian begins constructing a mental map of spatial relationships. Routes from side entrance to reading tables, proximity to surveillance blind spots, and potential dead drop locations within the library's perimeter. Measurements are estimated. 12 paces from entrance to table, 5 paces from table to nearest shelf. Each repeated observation confirms consistency, adding weight to suspicion without overstatement. 10:47 hours. The man manipulates the folded item subtly, adjusting its alignment beneath the newspaper. Observational logs are updated. Angle of placement, number of creases, duration of manipulation, 9 hours 47 minutes and 21 seconds to 9 hours 47 minutes and 39 seconds. Each notation is cataloged without commentary. Suspicion escalates through repetition, micro-pattern recognition, and spatial awareness. 10:53 hours. The librarian cross-references historical visitor records, noting that the trench-coated man appears intermittently over a 6-week period. Arrival times vary minimally, plus or minus 3 minutes, but the route and duration remain consistent. Temporal analysis reveals a pattern. Weekday mornings during low staff presence, coinciding with routine environmental checks by the librarian. This is procedural intelligence, recorded meticulously for potential handover to authorities. 11 o'clock hours. The librarian initiates a deliberate observation plan, positional adjustments to maximize visibility, mental notations of entry and exit points, and documentation of environmental cues. For example, the rear stairwell's threshold exhibits where patterns inconsistent with maintenance logs. Entry is recorded at 11 hours 2 minutes and 12 seconds. Exit at 11 hours 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Minor details such as creases on newspapers, the angle of books, and patrons' inadvertent obstruction of line of sight are noted as part of an analytical framework. 11:08 hours. Each visit is now cross-referenced against local transit schedules, allowing estimation of origin points and potential external surveillance. The trench-coated man appears consistently near the northbound bus stop before entering the library. Estimated walking distance from stop to side entrance, 162 meters, approximately 3 minutes pace. Repeated temporal mapping reinforces the emerging pattern of regularity. 11:15 hours. A secondary anomaly emerges. Small fingerprints or smudges are occasionally observed on the folded items. While invisible without close inspection, the librarian notes the presence and position relative to the table, book, and newspaper. Each observation is logged, left index, approximate orientation, and estimated pressure based on deformation of paper. This is recorded as procedural detail rather than implication of espionage. 11:21 hours. The librarian begins documenting potential dead drop locations, the space between shelving units, beneath books on the 940 shelf, and behind a loose panel near the rear reading table. Each potential drop point is logged with precise measurements, angles, and relative proximity to foot traffic. Observational consistency is maintained, preserving objectivity. 11:28 hours. Patrons continue their regular activities, but minor deviations are noted for comparison. A child glances toward the reference desk during the trench-coated man's adjustments. A visiting researcher lingers near the same table a few seconds longer than expected. Each detail is logged in chronological sequence, establishing a comprehensive record of environmental dynamics and potential interactions. 11:33 hours. The librarian reviews prior logs to identify overlaps in spatial patterns. Repeated visits near identical routes and synchronized microactions suggest a deliberate strategy of observation or transfer. While evidence remains circumstantial, the cumulative record provides sufficient detail to justify continued, heightened surveillance. 11:42 hours. The librarian begins passive tracking of the man beyond library premises. Visual observation from side windows notes the northbound bus stop, street lighting, and adjacent storefronts. Movements are timed. Departure from library at 11 hours 42 minutes and 16 seconds. Crossing street at 11 hours 42 minutes and 42 seconds. Entering coffee shop at 11 hours 43 minutes and 3 seconds. Each trajectory is logged in parallel with prior data, emphasizing procedural precision. 11:50 hours. Repeated documentation reinforces the notion of potential intelligence activity. Newspaper manipulation, item placement, and micro-movements display consistency beyond random behavior. The librarian's observations remain factual. Timestamps, routes, distances, and durations are recorded in detail, forming the foundation for eventual federal reporting. 11:57 hours. Minor cumulative irregularities prompt the librarian to formalize an internal log. Each instance is itemized: date, time, location, microactions, environmental conditions, and peripheral interactions. Pattern recognition is procedural, emphasizing accuracy and completeness rather than conjecture. The log establishes a chain of evidence suitable for external assessment. 12:03 hours. The librarian reviews all recorded entries, confirming consistency of observation methodology, avoidance of assumption, precision in timing, and attention to environmental context. This slow burn escalation, from routine documentation to conscious surveillance, marks the transition from ordinary civil service work to active intelligence observation. 12 hours. The section concludes with recognition of the trench-coated man's repeated pattern presence. While no definitive act of espionage has occurred, procedural documentation, micropattern analysis, and temporal mapping collectively produce a body of observational evidence. Suspicion has escalated, not through dramatic events, but through methodical attention to detail, creating the foundation for federal engagement in subsequent sections. 12:15 hours. As the librarian resumes shelving returned volumes, the camera lingers on the rear reading table. The folded newspaper remains in its usual spot, now a focal point of accumulated micro-observations. The environment is still routine and ordinary, yet imbued with the latent tension of a slow-burning investigation. Each recorded timestamp, every microaction, and spatial anomaly constitute the procedural infrastructure that will ultimately enable the FBI to recognize, track, and intercept espionage activity. 7:42 hours, Thursday, February 17, 1983. The library opens under an overcast winter sky, the soft hum of fluorescent lighting in the reading room contrasting with the muted urban sounds outside. The librarian begins a routine with the meticulous precision established over weeks of observation, logging overnight returns, aligning periodicals, and performing a visual sweep of high-traffic tables. Each movement is timed and recorded mentally, forming a precise operational baseline. 8:03 hours. The trench-coated man enters the library through the side door, again following his established route toward the rear reading table. His pace is deliberate, 18 steps from the door to the table, slight adjustments to his coat as he moves, precise positioning of a folded newspaper in relation to a nearby reference book. The librarian observes without interruption, recording microactions with timestamps. 8 hours, 3 minutes, and 17 seconds. 8 hours, 3 minutes, and 35 seconds. 8 hours, 4 minutes, and 2 seconds. 8:07 hours. For the first time, a small, concealed envelope becomes visible beneath the folded newspaper. Its presence is subtle, approximately 9.5 by 5.7 centimeters, thin, yellowed, and creased along one edge. The librarian notes the location, beneath the corner of a hardcover political reference book, partially shielded from general view. Procedural documentation includes measurements, relative position to table edges, and orientation of the envelope. 8:09 hours. The librarian maintains her position behind the reference desk, avoiding confrontation while continuing to record. The man adjusts the newspaper, subtly aligning it to conceal the envelope, before leaving the table to browse the periodicals briefly. Timing is precise: 8 hours 9 minutes and 23 seconds to 8 hours 9 minutes and 52 seconds. Every movement is logged, reinforcing a detailed sequential record. 8:14 hours. Decision-making occurs. The librarian recognizes the potential significance of the envelope. Procedure dictates careful handling. Gloves are worn. The envelope is photographed on site using a small handheld camera, and a separate, secure log is maintained for chain of custody tracking. The contents are not opened, maintaining evidence integrity while preserving the safety of the observer. 8:22 hours. With documentation complete, the librarian contacts local law enforcement. The communication is methodical. Description of the envelope, its location, observations of the trench-coated man, and prior patterns of repeated visits. Officers arrive within the hour, performing an initial assessment, confirming procedural steps, and coordinating with federal counterintelligence authorities. 9:03 hours. FBI agents arrive, presenting credentials and assuming responsibility for evidence management. The library is temporarily secured. All patrons are accounted for, and an initial sweep confirms no immediate threats. Agents conduct a methodical examination of the envelope's placement, environmental context, and associated micropatterns. Each step is timestamped. 9 hours 4 minutes and 12 seconds, initial photography. 9 hours 6 minutes and 23 seconds, precise measurement of table and surrounding objects. 9 hours 7 minutes and 51 seconds, preliminary documentation of potential fingerprints. 9:15 hours. Forensic analysis begins on-site. Chemical composition of paper is noted. Standard archival stock, possibly altered with faint, acid-resistant coatings. Ink composition on any markings is recorded, as are slight hand impression smudges on folds and edges. Agents catalog these micro details for later laboratory analysis, emphasizing procedural accuracy over narrative dramatization. 9:27 hours. Concurrently, agents conduct interviews with the librarian and staff, establishing the chronological framework of observed behavior. Timelines are cross-referenced against circulation logs, prior visit records, and environmental observations. Questions focus solely on verified observations, arrival times, movement routes, object placements, and any peripheral interactions with other patrons. Each response is documented with exact timestamps for future operational review. 9:38 hours. A preliminary hypothesis emerges. The envelope may contain classified instructions, microfilm, or coded messages. Historical intelligence protocols suggest potential handoffs or dead drop exchanges, likely coordinated with a partially identified handler. The narrative emphasizes procedural caution. Assumptions are minimized, and all further activity is treated as evidence-driven, not speculative. 9:44 hours. Agents map potential movement patterns of the trench-coated man outside the library. Observational records are integrated with transit schedules, foot traffic patterns, and local environmental conditions. Timing of movements is precise. 9 hours 44 minutes and 12 seconds, exit through side door. 9 hours 44 minutes and 47 seconds, crossing street to northbound bus stop. 9 hours 45 minutes and 23 seconds, entering a nearby cafe. Each action is logged to the second, forming the basis for predictive surveillance. 9:50 hours. The envelope is transported to a secure FBI field office. Chain of custody procedures are followed rigorously. Handoff between agents documented at 9 hours 50 minutes and 17 seconds. Evidence sealed, labeled, and logged at 9 hours 51 minutes and 5 seconds. Forensic photography is cross-checked with initial field documentation. ensuring no discrepancy in environmental and spatial context. 10:05 hours. Laboratory examination of the envelope begins. Contents are carefully unfolded under controlled conditions. A folded microfilm, thin enough to be concealed within standard library materials. Microfilm dimensions, markings, and any handwritten annotations are documented. Agents employ magnification tools and spectral analysis to assess authenticity, ink composition, and potential origin. Every observation is logged in real time, time-stamped for subsequent investigative reference. 10:22 hours. Parallel investigation focuses on the trench-coated man's broader activity. Surveillance teams review historical data, previous library visits, routes from local transit hubs, and minor environmental deviations noted in the librarian's logs. Agents identify recurring touchpoints, rear stairwell thresholds, specific book placements, and repeated manipulation of newspapers. These details, once mundane, are now integrated into a systematic surveillance plan. 10:36 hours. A critical operational protocol is initiated, cross-referencing microfilm content with known Soviet intelligence procedures. Analysts evaluate coded symbols, folds, and placement of markings to identify potential handlers and transmission methods. The librarian's detailed logs enable correlation with prior activity, specific table positions, newspaper folds, and exact timing of repeated gestures. 10:48 hours. Field surveillance units are deployed in parallel with laboratory analysis. Agents take fixed positions outside the library, observing foot traffic, adjacent streets, and potential rendezvous points. Micropatterns are recorded, bus stop usage, cafe visits, brief pedestrian interactions. Timing is precise. 10 hours 48 minutes and 12 seconds. Person of interest exits library. 10 hours 48 minutes and 47 seconds crosses street. 10 hours 49 minutes and 8 seconds enters coffee shop. Each movement is noted for later predictive modeling. 11:03 hours. A second envelope, smaller and thinner, is discovered during a controlled library sweep conducted by agents. Placement matches prior micropatterns, beneath a catalog card partially shielded by a hardcover book. Observational logs compare current positioning with previous occurrences, confirming repetitive behavioral strategies indicative of intelligence tradecraft. 11:14 hours. Agents consolidate evidence, photographs, physical items, and librarian logs. Each item is cataloged, labeled, and stored according to federal evidence handling procedures. Attention to detail ensures that all data, timestamps, positional coordinates, environmental context, is maintained in precise sequence. 11:22 hours. Interviews with the librarian continue. Analysts cross-reference her mental observations with physical evidence. Details confirmed include repeated times of arrival, consistent routes from side entrance to rear table, specific microactions performed on newspapers and books, and brief peripheral interactions with other patrons. The civilian observer's contributions are procedural, methodical, and foundational to subsequent investigative decisions. 11:36 hours. Analysis of transit data and street-level patterns allows agents to hypothesize potential external contacts or handlers. Surveillance plans are adjusted accordingly. Additional teams are positioned near likely dead drop locations, photographic records cross-referenced with prior micropatterns, and timing of repeated actions is refined to the second. 11:44 hours. The FBI determines that sufficient circumstantial and physical evidence exists to warrant continued covert surveillance of the trench-coated man, now designated a person of interest. Microfilm envelopes and repeated behavioral patterns provide a cohesive dataset. All findings are logged in chronological sequence with precise timestamps, environmental conditions, and cross-referenced visual documentation. 11:52 hours. The librarian resumes standard duties while remaining available to agents for clarification. Her prior observations, now validated through federal confirmation, reinforce the procedural nature of civilian intelligence contribution, systematic pattern recognition, meticulous documentation, and adherence to environmental observation protocols. 12:03 hours. Section 3 closes with procedural acknowledgement. The trench-coated man has not yet been apprehended, but the convergence of civilian observation, forensic analysis, and federal investigative protocols has produced actionable intelligence. Evidence handling, documentation, and operational planning form a disciplined framework, establishing the transition from suspicion to active federal intervention. The slow-burn escalation of tension continues, grounded in methodical, factual, and procedural observation rather than dramatic confrontation. 6:57 hours, Monday, February 21, 1983. The FBI initiates continuous surveillance on the trench-coated man, now formally designated as a suspected intelligence asset. Observational posts are established at strategic points: the library side and rear entrances, adjacent streets, a northbound bus stop, and a small coffee shop across the street. Each post is staffed by unmarked agents, equipped with cameras, binoculars, and synchronized timing devices. Environmental conditions are recorded: temperature 2 degrees Celsius, overcast sky, dry pavement, ambient traffic noise measured at 54 decibels. 7:02 hours. The suspected asset emerges from a northbound bus stop, walking toward the library via a predictable route. Distance measured: 162 meters, 18 steps per stride average, pace consistent with prior observations. Agents log each movement with precise timestamps: 7 hours, 2 minutes and 14 seconds, departure from stop; 7 hours, 2 minutes and 41 seconds, intersection crossing; 7 hours, 3 minutes and 8 seconds, arrival at side entrance. Microactions, adjustment of coat, glances toward surveillance positions, manipulation of a briefcase, are documented without inference. 7:06 hours. Entry into the library is captured on multiple fixed-point cameras. Footage confirms prior patterning: immediate movement toward rear reading table, placement of folded newspaper, and partial concealment of a small envelope beneath catalog reference books. Timing and environmental notes are consistent with previous civilian observations. Placement at 7 hours, 6 minutes and 52 seconds. Slight adjustment of newspaper at 7 hours, 7 minutes and 11 seconds. Each micro detail is integrated into the surveillance dossier. 7:15 hours. Field agents outside the library coordinate via secure radio channels, confirming no additional subjects of interest in the immediate vicinity. Timing synchronization ensures that interior and exterior observation records align precisely. Environmental notes include pedestrian flow, vehicular traffic, and potential blind spots, each logged with timestamp, agent position, and line-of-sight measurements. 7:21 hours. Microfilm extracted from the envelope, discovered previously, is reviewed by forensic analysts. Content is evaluated for coded messages, markings, and patterns consistent with known Soviet intelligence tradecraft. Analysts note small numerical sequences, fold patterns, and minor annotations on the film. Each observation is logged sequentially, cross-referenced with librarian-provided timestamps and prior field surveillance records. 7:33 hours. Surveillance identifies a second potential operational pattern. The asset leaves the table briefly, walking toward a rear stairwell. Duration: 22 seconds, recorded 7 hours, 33 minutes, and 12 seconds to 7 hours, 33 minutes, and 34 seconds. Placement of newspaper and microfilm remains consistent with prior behavioral norms. Micromovements, such as hand adjustments and eye direction, are recorded in procedural detail, forming part of predictive modeling for subsequent federal operations. 7:42 hours. A secondary surveillance team monitors pedestrian activity outside the library. Individuals moving near the side entrance are logged with timestamps and descriptions: clothing, height, direction, and movement duration. Repetition over consecutive days allows analysts to differentiate routine civilian traffic from potential accomplices. All micropatterns are cataloged in parallel with interior observations. 7:51 hours. Cross-referencing prior logs. Analysts identify recurrent handoff times: approximately 8:03 to 8:09 hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays, coinciding with envelope placement at the rear reading table. Predictive scheduling allows agents to anticipate potential transfers and adjust field positions accordingly. Documentation includes distance from entrances, line-of-sight measurements, environmental factors, and timing accuracy within 3-second intervals. 8:02 hours. Surveillance expands to a wider geographic perimeter. Transit routes from local bus stops, nearby cafes, and apartment buildings are logged. Timing of travel, duration of pauses, and repeated use of minor streets are analyzed. Each observation is cross-referenced with known intelligence methodologies, potential dead drop points, secondary observation posts, and probable communication nodes. 8:14 hours. Agents establish direct monitoring of suspected external contacts. Cameras and field observations capture peripheral individuals who approach the library or adjacent locations during key microfilm placement intervals. Each approach is logged with timestamp, movement vectors, and spatial relation to the primary asset. Repeated behavior over consecutive observation days suggests indirect coordination by an unidentified handler. 8:23 hours. The first controlled apprehension opportunity arises. Agents identify the asset preparing to leave the library with the microfilm partially concealed. Approach is delayed to ensure alignment of external surveillance teams, continuity of observation, and preservation of chain of custody integrity. Timing is critical. 8 hours, 23 minutes and 12 seconds. Partial adjustment of newspaper. 8 hours, 23 minutes and 29 seconds. Hand moves to pocket. 8 hours, 23 minutes and 41 seconds. Agent positioning confirmed. 8:33 hours. Arrest is conducted using minimal disruption. Agents approach simultaneously from multiple angles, ensuring the asset remains contained within line of sight. Microfilm is secured immediately. All movements are logged, agent positions, timing of hand contact, and environmental conditions. No physical confrontation occurs. The process remains procedural, emphasizing evidence preservation and operational safety. 8:42 hours. Confiscated materials, including envelopes, folded newspapers, and microfilm, are cataloged. Forensic documentation includes environmental context, table dimensions, placement angles, and positional relations to nearby shelving. Chain of custody logs are updated in real time. All micro details are synchronized with prior civilian observation logs to establish consistency and procedural rigor. 8:51 hours. Interrogation preparation begins. Analysts review compiled surveillance data, civilian logs, and forensic examination results. Timelines are synchronized: arrival, placement, adjustments, departure, and environmental interactions. Micropatterns are highlighted, emphasizing consistency of behavior and alignment with known tradecraft. 9:03 hours. Interrogation is conducted under controlled conditions. The asset's recruitment, operational methodology, and partial network details are elicited systematically. Observed patterns, envelope placement, newspaper adjustment, microfilm concealment, are confirmed in narrative sequence. The procedural tone remains factual. Motivations, timing, and interactions are documented without embellishment. 9:14 hours. Operational methodology of the asset is cross-referenced with federal intelligence protocols. Handoff strategies, dead drop usage, and concealment techniques are validated against prior Soviet intelligence case files. Each confirmation is logged with time, observation context, and environmental notes. Procedural documentation ensures evidence admissibility and continuity of operational understanding. 9:22 hours. The unidentified handler remains partially hidden. Interrogation and field analysis provide only indirect evidence. Irregular movement patterns, brief peripheral contact, and cryptic symbols on microfilm. Agents note timing discrepancies and unexplained environmental anomalies, but no direct identification is achieved. The narrative emphasizes ambiguity. Gaps remain despite exhaustive procedural investigation. 9:33 hours. The asset's confession details motivations, background, and assigned tasks. Microfilm placement, envelope concealment, and minor manipulations of newspapers are described in procedural terms. Each act is cross-verified against surveillance logs, librarian notes, and forensic findings. The handler is acknowledged as an external orchestrator, partially observed but not physically identified. 9:42 hours. Forensic analysis is reconciled with observational data. Microfilm content is categorized, noting numerical sequences, coded instructions, and full patterns. Minor environmental markers, table creases, newspaper alignment, and pager movement are documented, confirming prior hypotheses of repeated micro-pattern behavior. 9:51 hours. The procedural chain of events is consolidated into a formal dossier. Evidence includes civilian observation logs, timestamps, surveillance photographs, forensic reports, and interrogation transcripts. Micropatterns and timing sequences are diagrammed to visualize operational methodology. This comprehensive record facilitates predictive modeling for potential handler identification and further operational planning. 10:02 hours. Section 4 concludes with procedural resolution of the asset's identity, operational methods, and micropatterns. The trench-coated man is apprehended. Microfilm and other physical evidence are secured. Interrogation provides insight into recruitment, instructions, and repeated environmental behaviors. The handler remains unidentified, a spectral presence whose influence is evident but whose physical trace is absent. The slow-burn tension of observation, pattern recognition, and methodical federal intervention underscores the documentary tone, preserving the subtlety and ambiguity characteristic of Cold War intelligence operations. 6:45 hours, Friday, March 4, 1983. Following weeks of detailed surveillance, forensic analysis, and interrogation of the apprehended asset, federal authorities implement a controlled operation aimed at capturing the partially identified handler. Observational teams are positioned at multiple locations: library rear exits, surrounding streets, local bus stops, and a small parking lot adjacent to a convenience store. Each position is logged with precise coordinates, elevation data, and line-of-sight angles. Environmental conditions are recorded: temperature 3 degrees Celsius, low cloud cover, damp pavement, and pedestrian flow quantified at 12 individuals per 5-minute interval. 6:52 hours. Field teams synchronize watches, recording precise arrival times, positional adjustments, and surveillance-covered gaps. Agents note microactions of pedestrians, cross-referencing against prior pattern recognition to distinguish potential handlers from routine civilians. Surveillance logs emphasize methodical observation, duration of footstep sequences, direction of gaze, hand placement, and minor deviations from expected travel routes. 7:03 hours. Predictive modeling identifies likely dead drop locations based on prior envelope placement, microfilm concealment, and newspaper manipulations. For primary sites are monitored: library rear reading table, a narrow alley between two commercial buildings, a bench near a bus stop, and a trash receptacle partially shielded from public view. Agents rotate coverage to maintain visual continuity without disrupting natural behavior, each rotation logged with timestamp and observational details. 7:14 hours. Environmental assessment confirms potential points of handler approach: tree lines, shadows cast by adjacent structures, and brief pedestrian bottlenecks. Agents calculate probable lines of sight, timing of steps from the main street to dead drop sites, and duration of expected micromovements. Predictive timing is synchronized to within 15-second intervals. 7:23 hours. Surveillance teams observe the area for extended periods, noting minor anomalies: individuals lingering near trash receptacles, brief glances toward library rear doors, and subtle adjustments of clothing that may indicate concealed objects. Each observation is logged, time-stamped, and cross-referenced against prior intelligence to maintain procedural integrity. 7:32 hours. Despite extensive preparation, no direct approach by the handler occurs. Agents review micropattern data, timing of asset-related movements, repeated environmental behaviors, and prior handoff intervals. The handler's apparent counter-surveillance measures are inferred through absence, deviation from predicted times, avoidance of monitored areas, and lack of observable interaction with secondary subjects. 7:42 hours. Minor operational adjustments are made. Teams reposition to secondary observation points, increasing coverage of peripheral streets, alleyways, and transit stops within 150 meters of primary locations. Each positional change is logged: timestamp, coordinates, environmental observations, and line-of-sight assessment. Surveillance is maintained without engagement, emphasizing evidence collection and procedural documentation. 753 hours. Analysis of prior activity indicates the handler's use of staggered arrival intervals and irregular microactions designed to evade pattern recognition. Agents correlate these behaviors with environmental factors, lighting changes, pedestrian density, and minor weather fluctuations. Observations are documented in sequential logs. 7 hours 53 minutes and 17 seconds, 7 hours 53 minutes and 42 seconds, 7 hours 53 minutes and 59 seconds, each entry noting minute deviations from expected pattern intervals. 8:02 hours. A simulated dead drop test is conducted. Agents position an inert envelope at the library rear table, replicating prior placements by the asset. Duration of observation is precisely logged. 8 hours 2 minutes and 12 seconds, envelope placed. 8 hours 2 minutes and 48 seconds, surveillance positions confirmed. 8 hours 3 minutes and 15 seconds, all peripheral lines of sight verified. Despite replication, no approach by the handler occurs. The absence is treated as data, procedural recognition that the handler remains aware of surveillance capabilities. 8:14 hours. External analysis of the apprehended asset's confession is reconciled with observed behavior. Micropatterns, repeated environmental adjustments, and precise timing confirm operational methodologies, yet fail to identify the handler's physical location. Analysts note that indirect methods, coded signals, staggered visits, and peripheral positioning effectively conceal the handler from direct observation. 8:23 hours. The operation transitions from attempted apprehension to passive monitoring. Teams maintain coverage of potential approach routes, recording micropatterns, timing, and environmental conditions for future intelligence correlation. Observations include pedestrian interactions, transient vehicle stops, and subtle adjustments of objects in potential dead drop zones. Each action is logged sequentially. 8 hours 23 minutes and 11 seconds, 8 hours 23 minutes and 34 seconds, 8 hours 23 minutes and 52 seconds, with environmental context noted. 8:32 hours. The federal focus shifts toward internal consolidation of captured intelligence. Microfilm envelopes and observational logs from both the librarian and field agents are integrated into a procedural dossier. Each entry is timestamped, cross-referenced, and analyzed for operational patterns, highlighting the efficacy of prior civilian contributions while acknowledging gaps caused by the elusive handler. 8:41 hours. Analysts review long-term environmental interactions, repeated newspaper placement, adjustments of books, and timing of envelope concealments. These micropatterns, once observed and recorded by the librarian, now form the backbone of predictive operational methodology, despite the handler's continued absence. The procedural narrative emphasizes fact-based assessment over speculative interpretation. 8:52 hours. The asset is formally processed through federal channels. Evidence cataloging includes chain of custody verification, photographic documentation, and microfilm analysis. Procedural notes detail retrieval methods, timing, and environmental conditions at the moment of apprehension. Interrogation summaries confirm operational roles, task assignments, and repeated environmental manipulations consistent with Soviet intelligence tradecraft. 9:03 hours. Judicial and administrative procedures follow. The asset is formally charged, processed, and scheduled for sentencing. All procedural documentation is preserved, creating a comprehensive chronological record of observation, interception, and federal analysis. Micropattern evidence, corroborated by civilian logs and federal surveillance, is presented as part of the evidentiary record. 9:12 hours. Despite full procedural execution, the handler remains unidentified and unapprehended. Analysis of micropatterns, environmental adjustments, and repeated timing anomalies suggests indirect coordination and strategic countersurveillance. Logs document the absence of direct engagement, highlighting gaps in operational coverage and the limitations of observational methodology. 9:23 hours. Section 5 emphasizes unresolved operational ambiguity. While the asset is neutralized and microfilm secured, the handler's identity, location, and broader network remain undetermined. Analysts maintain procedural notation of suspected operational methods, staggered arrivals, peripheral concealment, environmental awareness, and micro-pattern evasion. Each detail is integrated into predictive intelligence models for future surveillance and analysis. 9:32 hours. The librarian returns to routine duties at the library, her contribution formally acknowledged in federal reports but remaining unpublicized. Logs and timestamps she maintained are incorporated into the official dossier, highlighting the critical role of civilian observation in the escalation from initial suspicion to federal investigation. Procedural integrity ensures that each micropattern and time-stamped observation contributes to long-term intelligence frameworks. 9:41 hours. The final federal assessment underscores Cold War ambiguity. While partial operational success is achieved, asset apprehension, evidence collection, and procedural documentation, the handler eludes capture. Surveillance logs, environmental measurements, and micro-pattern analysis provide insight into operational methodology, but fail to resolve the central unknown, the handler's identity, location, and intentions. 9:50 hours. The operation is quietly concluded. Surveillance teams are withdrawn in a phased manner, with post-operation environmental assessments logged, pedestrian density, vehicle flow, and lighting conditions at the time of withdrawal. Each site is documented, photographed, and preserved for potential future operations. The narrative emphasizes procedural closure of the immediate operation while acknowledging broader uncertainty. 9:57 hours. Intelligence analysts reflect on systemic limitations inherent to Cold War counterintelligence. Dependence on civilian observation, reliance on micro-pattern recognition, and the persistent gap created by partially identified foreign handlers. Procedural documentation highlights successes in evidence collection and asset apprehension, while maintaining acknowledgement of unresolved elements. 10:03 hours. Section 5 closes with an explicit acknowledgement of ambiguity and procedural continuity. The handler's absence reinforces the pervasive uncertainty that characterized Cold War espionage, partial truths, intermittent observation, and persistent intelligence gaps. The librarian's initial observations, now validated through federal documentation, illustrate the subtle interplay between civilian diligence and structured counterintelligence operations. 10:12 hours. The story concludes with a reflection on unresolved secrecy, operational successes, apprehension of the asset, recovery of microfilm, and consolidation of civilian and federal logs, contrast with enduring gaps in knowledge. The handler, though central to the espionage network, remains a shadow, indirectly evidenced, strategically absent, and historically ambiguous. The slow-burn tension, methodical observation, and procedural rigor characteristic of Cold War intelligence remain palpable, leaving the audience with an enduring sense of uncertainty and reflection on the opaque nature of global espionage operations.